What a lot of people don't realize about Bible translation, and specifically the translation into English, is how much linguistic noise there actually is between the source and target languages. Let's just take the New Testament for a moment. Let's set the Old Testament aside, but just the New Testament. And I think you'll understand what I'm saying. The New Testament was originally written in the colloquial Greek of the 1st century Eastern Mediterranean. The dialogue and teachings of Jesus that it records, however, were likely originally spoken in Aramaic, classical Syriac, not the biblical Aramaic of Daniel and Ezra. And this was at least most of the time. And as such, there are a number of Aramaicisms in the text, which were directly translated by 4 different authors into the more widely spoken Greek. In the 5th century, the Greek text was translated into colloquial or vulgar Latin. Think about the amount of linguistic change which occurred just between the 1st and 5th centuries when Jerome translated the text. It's about 400 to 500 years worth of change. To put that into perspective, that's the difference between Anglo-Saxon, think the original Beowulf poem, and Elizabethan English, think Shakespeare and the KJV. The latter is still mutually intelligible with modern English, the former is not, and must be learned as a foreign language. And the truth is, the latter is pushing it as far as intelligibility with modern English now. So when Jerome translated it into the Latin of the 5th century, he translated 1st century Greek with a 5th century Greek understanding of the words and syntax, and both changed over that period of time. The Latin text, the Vulgate, was the de facto standard of the New Testament for the Western Church and Western scholarship for about 1,000 years, and long past the time when Latin was the colloquial language of anyone. By the 15th and 16th centuries, it had morphed into what we now know as the Romance languages and their respective dialects, much as Anglo-Saxon morphed into Elizabethan. Latin, as such, only remained spoken as, essentially, an artificial language used for education and ecclesiastical liturgy. It was no one's birth language. While it was artificially maintained, the meanings of the Latin words continued to shift and change over that 1,000-year period. The artificial Latin spoken in Martin Luther's day would have been barely intelligible, if at all, to Jerome in the 5th century. When John Wycliffe, William Tyndale, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and the other early translators and reformers first read the New Testament, they read it in this artificially maintained Latin, not their own native tongues, and not in the original Greek. The Greek texts themselves have been maintained by the Byzantine Empire and the Eastern Orthodox Church, but were largely unknown in the Western Roman Catholic Church until after 1451. When the Byzantine capital of Constantinople fell to the Turks and a large number of Greek scholars and clergy fled with their manuscripts west to Rome and other European capitals. Those who came spoke Greek, but a Greek which, like the other languages, had morphed over the 1,500-year time span since the original texts were written, and was mutually unintelligible with the Greek of the New Testament. Furthermore, there was no one unified text of the Greek New Testament until Erasmus compiled his Textus Receptus from Eastern Orthodox lectionaries and other manuscripts. Ironically, he only did this so he could place it side by side with the Latin to prove the superiority of the Latin text over the original Greek. This is the linguistic context of Luther's German translation from the original languages, as well as Tyndale's English and Calvin's French translations. They all may have been excellent scholars, but in many, if not most cases, their translations relied heavily on the meaning of the Latin text as they understood it in the 16th century, even if they were trying to translate it from the Greek, because they simply did not have the tools at their disposal to achieve enough of a fluency in 1st century colloquial Greek laced with Aramaicisms in half the text. Modern translations of the New Testament often still rely heavily on the work of these men. Virtually all modern translations into English rely on Tyndale's understanding of what the text was saying. Even if they don't copy his words directly, they often paraphrase them. Probably a good 75% of the King James Version of the New Testament is plagiarized directly from Tyndale, and most follow suit to a greater or lesser degree because few translators want to deviate from what has already been done, even if modern translation tools tell a different story. Put simply, the New Testament which is read today in English has 2,000 years' worth of linguistic, cultural, and theological noise, which makes it difficult to understand what the original authors were trying to say to their own target audiences, who knew the language, culture, and worldview because they shared it.